Maybe the most beautiful book I've ever seen.
Oh
Beautiful.
my.
The Cattails, a history. I don't know if you guys looking on YouTube can see the shimmering goldness of it. How We Learned to Live with Them by Jerry D. Moore, who doesn't call himself Dr. Moore, but I think he probably, just even based on this book, not his other books, deserves several doctorates. This book is so beautiful inside and out. It's a wonder. It's like taking a trip to all the places that you talk about where people throughout history have lived with cats. You are an archaeologist and an anthropologist and a professor emeritus of anthropology at California State University, and you've been an archaeologist and an anthropologist on a number of continents. When did cats become such a big deal in your life that you wrote this big, fat, chunky, juicy, stuffed with beautiful ideas and history and pictures? When did this take you over?
I have to say, it was soon after meeting the woman that I have been married to for 43 years now,
Oh, nice.
because basically, early in our relationship, this animal came flying through the bedroom window, and my wife to be Jan said, Jerry, the cat stays or you go.
Oh, I guess you came in the door and the cat came in the window.
Yes, that's right. I didn't, of course, I didn't know that at the time, but in the course of living with her for all these years and with multiple cats, there was time after time where I thought to myself, how does this happen?
I
There's a, Jodi Picoult has this great quote. She says, extraordinary things are always hiding in places people never think to look.
Oh, isn't that lovely? That would describe this book
Right.
because they're hiding in plain sight in our modern world. But you talk about these incredible excavations done on many continents. And I must say, the riveting thing to me about the book is all the ways in which cats have been buried by humans, with humans, for humans throughout history. I wasn't aware of that. I think
Yeah.
we all know that the Egyptians, quote unquote, revered cats. Don't understand how they lived with them. And the archaeology, the digging up of many mummified cats, which I didn't even know about, and I know a bit about Egypt. I visited some of the temples. The cat thing going on underground, like right in front of us, but not, is amazing. And
Right.
with something you dug up, literally and maybe figuratively.
Well, I haven't excavated in Egypt. I want to clarify that. My work has principally been in South America and Mesoamerica and the Western North America.
Yes.
But it was stunning to learn about not only the mummification of cats, but to realize that according to a number of Egyptologists, um, mummies were the most numerous artifacts that the ancient Egyptians ever made.
Which we didn't know until
Right.
I didn't know it.
And when you think, okay, there are more ancient Egyptian mummies than there are ancient Egyptian pots and pans, that's extraordinary.
Yes.
And one of the stories that I talk about a little bit in the book, the chapter on ancient Egypt, is how this huge cat cemetery was found along the Nile. And actually, the cats were exported, sold in by the ton
Hmm.
to a English Bristol-based exporting firm to be used as fertilizer. They were ground up and used as
Hmm.
fertilizer. And so that's just a bizarre set, different kinds of weavings of cats in and out of different historic and cultural moments.
But the way you write it, some of those mummified cats that were in better condition and were more extraordinary looking, because you have a photo of them in the book
Oh yeah,
from let's say, a museum. I forget where the picture's from, but each cat was individually mummified, like we think of mummies, and they were sold to collectors in London. But then you write about the children, the Egyptian children, latter day, but not
right.
modern children, and tell about what they would do with the mummies.
There was a whole annual ceremony in the New Kingdom period, in honor of Bastet, who was a feline and fertility goddess.
Hmm.
And so lots of cats were mummified as part of that ceremony. Then, centuries later, those cats became desirable tourist items
Hmm.
for the Victorians who were doing the trip up the Nile.
Yes.
And children, Egyptian children, would excavate them, the mummies, and then sell them as souvenirs
On the banks of the Nile.
on the banks of the Nile. Right.
To the tourists, it's such life goes on. There we have the
Right.
elder marbles, right, in
Right.
Greece, and the British plunderers, if you will, although
Right.
he was a
Yeah.
plunderer until it wasn't allowed anymore, taking off the frieze of the Parthenon. But in this case, digging up layers of mummified cats. You talked about
Right.
that burial place, and these were not. The thing that's interesting to me is these were cats purposely buried. They weren't
Yes.
cats, oh, let's kill all the cats in Cairo and then dump them in a mass
No.
grave. This was a purposeful, ritualistic event, and the ones who were individually mummified were very well preserved. And the guy who took them by the ton to use as fertilizer, it's like, that's one more thing we could do with these tons of cats.
And I think that one of the things that's really quite outstanding is to realize that those differing but recurrent interactions between peoples in the past were
Hmm.
not limited to one area like
Right.
ancient Egypt. So, for example, something that we really only started learning about in the last 20 years or so is the extent to which big, large, dangerous cats like jaguars and mountain lions
Hmm.
were actually exchanged, captured alive, and exchanged long distances in Mesoamerica. So, for instance, they get captured in the more humid jungle areas of what is today Guatemala or southern Mexico,
Okay.
and they get exported alive all the way to central Mexico, where there were offerings of live cats placed at the base of the Pyramid of the Moon at the site of Teotihuacan.
Didn't you also have some large cats that were buried alive?
Yes, that's right. They were. In fact, one of the things that we got to do, actually, my wife is a Mesoamerican archaeologist,
Oh,
and
no.
one of the pleasures is that when you're traveling around, you can drop in on people's excavations and get behind the scene tours. And so we actually got a tour of the tunnel through the base of the Pyramid of the Moon, and were shown the wooden cage and the
Wow.
bones that
Wow.
had held this mountain lion, and they knew it had been buried alive because the cage had claw and tooth marks on the wooden bars.
We've done a lot of crazy, cruel, and exotic things with animals. There's one story, and I thought you were also going to say that we have this complicated relationship. The cats weren't eaten, although other animals were, as I understand it, right? I don't.
Um, they're rarely eaten. The places, the times that has been really documented would be as a famine, or when there'd been a, what do you call it, and a town had been surrounded by a foreign army and
Right.
reduced to doing something like that. Not a food of choice.
But on the other hand, some of them were buried simply to appease the gods, or buried with people in a general kind of, oh, send you off to the afterworld with containers of food and maybe a
Right.
thing to amuse you on your way to the other side, as well as a cat. But you write about this 25-year-old young man who was wealthy because he was buried in a way that ritualistically showed a lot of stuff. I want you to pronounce the name of this town. I want to know this name. Shiluro Cambos. That's not how it's said.
I can't remember what.
And it was a human animal burial where the animal was buried in parallel to this 25-year-old
Mhm.
who was young when he died, or maybe it wasn't all that young then, for all I know, 11,000 years ago. And there was a lot of burial sites in this area.
I know the one on Crete.
Yes.
Shuyo. Oh, yes, that's right.
How do you
Um,
say that?
I let's see. I had to look it up.
It's just a cool word. Can I just say this book is so full of cool words and cool places, and you find yourself talking aloud to yourself, oh, Shaluro, Cambos, wow.
Yeah.
want to
Yeah,
remember that.
yeah, Shiokombos. The thing that is so fascinating about that is that that's a site on Crete. I remember that right.
Right.
And it's not the earliest human settlements on the island, but it's one of the earliest agricultural settlements on the
Mhm,
island. And as a young man who is buried, and I think if I remember correctly, he was probably in his early 20s.
mhm,
And to him, completely intact, is a cat burial.
mhm.
So it's not like the situation we were just talking about in Mesoamerica, where the cats were there as a sacrifice. The animal was there as a companion after death.
Yes.
And again, you just take those two different cases that we've just talked about in the last 5 minutes, and you realize, wow, there is an enormous variation in the way in which humans and cats have been interacting in different places at different times, but it's fairly deep in terms of prehistory.
And something that I don't think until your book Cattails has we've all been aware of. We've all been aware of the Sphinx with the cat's head.
Sure.
So that's, oh wow, the Egyptians really must have revered cats, and that's all we know in our dumb, uneducated way, if you will. But the people that are archaeologists and anthropologists and historians, I'm not sure they even knew the extent to which cats were in that culture. And then you have another one about them in a mosque and the thousands of cats who were buried underneath this.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's amazing.
very different cultures. And then the whole attitude towards cats in that culture, where dogs and pigs are considered filthy, but cats are not at all. They're allowed in the mosque to this day. You have a picture, a modern day picture
Yes.
of them sprawling
Yes.
in the mosque.
Yeah. Yeah. So these varied interactions between humans and cats would surprise anybody who didn't own a cat. But by the time you've spent decades around them, you think, man, these animals are capable of almost anything.
But and yet, the point of the book is how we've learned to live alongside them and how they've learned to live alongside us. They're the same creatures they were millennia ago. They are not changed in their looks or their behavior.
Yeah, that's generally true. There's certainly a huge difference between a tabby in your living room and a tiger stalking the outskirts of Mumbai. And we can't ignore that.
Right.
And in fact, but what's interesting is that those animals have this, whether they be leopards on the edges of Mumbai or mountain lions in the Hollywood Hills.
Hmm.
They have this, I don't know, this kind of odd magnetism that attracts us. And one could maybe argue that it has its roots in our need as a species to say, wait a second, we got to keep an eye out on these creatures. But but it goes beyond that. It's not simply a defensive mechanism, or we would have exterminated them by now.
Right. Instead, we've celebrated them and collected them in a sense, historically.
Yeah,
It's interesting because the way in which people interacted with dogs has been talked about. Oh, the dogs were good at eating the human scraps and maybe helping to hunt and helping protect
sure.
the village or the series of tents. And there's a sense that, okay, cats must have helped with mice and rats. But you talk about mice a lot in the book and the importance of mice and humans. And I think you say that mice, after humans, are the most successful, or they're the most successful small mammal. There's so many facts, Jerry, in this book that are just astounding because we've heard that cats, all cats, but particular ones we live with, are the most fierce killers of any species. Is that right? I've heard that said, that they
Yeah,
kill more often or more prolifically or more effectively than any other critter.
I'm not sure of that. I can imagine there's some pretty deadly microbes and viruses out
Oh
there.
no, we mean animals.
Yeah, but they're certainly animals to be reckoned with.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the point of emphasis should be, is that we, in ways that are distinct from, for example, the ways in which humans interact with chickens or pigs, for instance, cats, through that long prehistory of our interactions, seem to have inculcated in us this need to be attentive to what's going on behind their little eyes.
Hmm.
And that's a pretty fascinating part of the human condition.
We certainly think we know what's going on with dogs. Doesn't mean we're right, but we imagine that we understand the dogs, and we know that we don't fully understand the cats. They remain mysterious. They
Yeah,
remain
yeah,
elusive.
I think that's generally true. And but one of the other things that in doing this research for this book, one of the things that I was really surprised to learn about is completely different, culturally unconnected traditional societies
Hmm.
who interact with large cats have this very similar respect for them. In even folks that, like, I write about, actually quoting from one of David Quammen's books, about folks who, traditional herdsmen in India,
Hmm.
who was not only attacked, but almost killed by these tigers, and yet survived the attack after a long hospital stay. And his attitude was not, let's go out and kill all the tigers. His
Right.
attitude was, the animal is doing what the animal needs to do. We have to respect that.
Which may be respect for cats, or just maybe an Indian cultural way of thinking.
Yeah, except that we can see a similar sort of philosophy among traditional Maasai in Kenya and
Hmm.
Tanzania. In fact, it was striking how similar the attitudes towards large, wild, dangerous cats were in these two culturally unconnected regions.
Yeah.
So it makes one think that this has that kind of respect and appreciation has perhaps rather deep or at least recurrent roots.
It's really interesting to see in those cultures, there's very few cats. Now, from what I understand of India, having just been there on virtually a brief visit for a couple of weeks, you don't see cats anywhere. You see these dogs who break my heart, the cows who break my heart. They're all dehydrated, starving,
Right.
listless, lethargic. I don't see any cats. And I was wondering about that. And I'm
Well,
wondering what you know about cats in India.
I don't know very much about domesticated cats in India, but I do write about the presence of leopards
Yes, you do.
in the Ganjai National Park, which is
Mhm.
on the edge of Mumbai.
Yep.
And it's really interesting that the two metropolitan areas in the world that have large wild cats roaming within their city limits are Mumbai with leopards and Los Angeles with mountain lions.
That is fascinating.
And one of the things that I came across, I don't know if I even made it into the book, but there was a cost benefit analysis of leopards in Mumbai because every once in a while there'd be move afoot to try to get rid of them and exterminate them. And the cost benefit analysis determined that more lives were saved by leopards eating basically feral and rabid dogs
Wow.
than,
Wow.
than were lost to big cat attacks. Yeah, again, a mind-boggling, a completely unexpected relationship between humans and cats.
And yes, and then there's this alternate one of humans and rodents, because the cats and the rodents are clearly connected in the relationship to the human world. We all understand that in a barn where there's a granary, the cats keep the mice out of the grain. And maybe we understand in cities where there's rats, if you've got a big, strong enough cat, the cat can maybe help take care of the rats. But historically, you talk about that in the book, the number of mice throughout history, and you show them depicted in wonderful carvings and woodcuts, and that they've always been an issue in human life. Mice
Yeah,
have.
Yeah, but there's actually a couple of things that need to be brought into the discussion. The first is that even though there are various members of the moose family, the mouse genus,
Right.
it's really not until two things happen. One, where human beings develop agriculture, especially the storage of grain agriculture. In the Near East, even though that occurs in other places in the world as well, and there is this migration, I'll call it that, of this one species of mouse, Mus musculus,
Yes.
out of the Himalayas
Yes.
into the Near East and the Fertile Crescent. And it's not until that occurs that there is a dense enough habitat that attracts wild cat ancestors
Yes.
into this human environment. And all of our, despite the fact that on every continent, except for Australia and Antarctica, there is a wild species of cat that is of a size that you would think, okay, that could be a domesticate.
Right.
All of our cats are descended from this Felis sylvestris libica in the Near East and North Africa. And that comes into the human sphere only after we have agriculture
Yes.
and we get the mice coming in, and that creates a dense enough habitat to attract wild mice, excuse me, wild cats that eventually become our domesticated ancestors.
And that's why the book's so interesting. Things are connected in ways that we're not used to necessarily thinking about, and it's across continents and across thousands of years. So it gives us this long view. And you have a picture in the book of that cat, that original cat, and its face looks a lot like what we think of as our tabbies. It looks recognizable. It doesn't look like a ferocious wild beast, although basically it's a ferocious wild beast.
Yeah.
You want that in your house for sure. But you do want his relatives, who the few tame ones, right? Or the few mellow ones, or the few lazy ones that wanted to come indoors and be by a
Right.
fire and maybe get some other scraps, not just mice. Jerry Moore, you've done an amazing job with this book.
Thank
It's
you so
right.
much.
It really is an armchair trip through history with a cat by your side. It's a beautiful book. There's so much in it. I feel like every chapter could be somebody's doctoral thesis. I thought, oh, somebody could just steal a whole chapter and get a doctorate. Cattails: A History, How We Learn to Live with Them. Jerry D. Moore, absolutely the most beautiful book. And I will tell you that you can find this book. Please don't buy it on Amazon. Please buy it from the Literary Cat Company. She's going to be featuring the book on her shelves. Jennifer and I will talk about it. She often comes on the show and we talk about books that are cat themed that we particularly love. So the Literary Cat Company, please support a wonderful book and mortar bookstore that loves books, loves cats, loves authors. And that is a wonderful way to give this book, which would also be, in my opinion, an amazing gift for someone who loves cats or loves history or wants to learn something about the human race they didn't know before. Thank you so much for the wonderful work you and your wife put into this.
And don't forget the cats.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you to the cats for jumping through the window. And we even mentioned the burial of several of your own cats in your backyard and
Yeah.
that comparison with how cats used to be buried. It's a great book. It's very human. It's very, even though it's scholarly, it's in no way intimidating. It's just a welcoming book. So thank you so much for the love and care and thought you put into it. And
Thank
thanks
you
for,
for the invitation, and I really appreciated the conversation.
so did I. Thanks
Take
a lot.
care.
You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.